Okay, welcome back. I've got some very interesting things to share with you today. I am going to talk about Disclosure Day, that particular movie directed by Spielberg that is disclosure about ETs. And so I want to discuss that because I picked up a lot of things in that movie, and I wanted to share them with you. They were things that struck me as mathematically with numbers. I just was very compelled. I was seeing something, and I just want to present that and see if anybody else was catching any of this. So let's go ahead. I'm gonna go over some things in the movie, discuss some things that popped up. So let me just share my screen here and let's pull up that. All right. So I hope you can see this. So I've titled this Disclosure Within Disclosure. And let me make this a little bit smaller so that I can make sure that, okay, disclosure within disclosure. And why did I name it that? Because I think there's something much, much deeper than the revelation of ETs, which for most of us who've been tracking this for a very long time, we didn't really need the movie to give us that information. But it's appreciated that it did come out. And the movie is largely centered on disclosure with one particular race, the Greys. And there's footage that's in there that appears to be authentic footage about crashed ships and recovery of bodies, as well as some that were still alive. And it's quite compelling. And Spielberg does a really good job in presenting that information. But you know what? I'm going to show you some things. And if you haven't seen the movie, I will just say that I'm going to give you some information that might tell some of the movie, but this will also heighten your awareness to look for these things as well. So I've got this titled Disclosure Within Disclosure, and I'm going to tell you what I think a secondary, very large disclosure that's writing beneath the main disclosure, and it has to do with numbers and gematria, some things that show up. So many of you already know, if you've been following my YouTube channel, that I have a specific lattice, an etheric lattice, that I have been building through some mathematics and this hasn't been demonstrated with hardcore physics, but I'm building it with the math, and the math keeps taking me to in a specific direction, and I keep coming back to this direction when I'm solving, looking at some of the math. So this is a scalar circle with three concentric rings. I have a book that's called the 363 Code. If you're interested in looking at that, it's on Amazon. So I'm not going to go back through everything. I will just say that Nikola Tesla believed in an ether, a lattice, and this was an invisible structure. And this structure had a specific shape or geometry. And through resonance, you could interact with this, and you could have an exchange of information or life force energy. So Tesla was very big on resonance, very good. And so he's known for that quote with 369 and the keys to the universe. And also, here's the picture of an orb web, and the orb web looks a lot like his impulse coil, which looks like a wheel. It looks like a bunch of concentric, rings or circles with radial lines. And over here, you can see I placed numbers on this. Mine over here has to do with I have a scalar circle where I took the Euclidean circle and added 3 degrees. So instead of 360 degrees, I have a scalar circle that's 363 degrees. And there are 11 intervals in here, and each interval you can see is broken up into 33 degrees. And so 33 times 11 will take you to 363. If you then go around a second time, you end up at 726, and three times you end up in 1089. So I've talked about these numbers, specifically the 1089 family. I'll mention a little bit as we go through this because I want to connect some of this as we go through to the Disclosure Day movie. So before we get into that, this is my general kind of when I think about things, I'm thinking about this lattice, this invisible lattice. And the physicists know that space is chock full of energy. And so this concept of a lattice, I keep coming into as with this lattice specific numbers, and these numbers have to do with in base 10 math have to do with the number 11, the number 3, and and I've got some math behind this to describe this etheric lattice as well. And also then the lattice from the lattice there are constraints and geometry is comes, the grid is becoming kind of shape. And I'm going to talk about heptograms, nested polygons, ratios, proportions, symmetry. And I've got this equation here, which is not overly complicated, b plus 1 divided by b squared plus 1. And this has to do with form. And then there are certain constraints in the lattice, and then we get physical organization, appearance of matter. So out of the invisible, we get the visible, and there are steps that are along the way. And so when I talk about numbers, they're not. I'll use a number, but I'm really talking about proportions and ratios and symmetry, relationships, not so much a specific number. And so as we go in here, after saying not a specific number, I'm going to show you numbers that pop up during Disclosure Day. And these numbers will have relationships, but I'm going to just present them as the numbers. So as I was sitting there watching the movie, there's like a point in the movie where individuals working at the DoD, they don't show up for work, and 12 of them don't show up, and they're breaking away, and they're trying to bring the information to the people. And so they have access to specific tapes, some devices, and they are literally breaking away from a group within DoD that's been holding all the information, and they've just become kind of fed up with it, and they want the public to know. So on one day, 12 members working within the group, that team, they don't show up. So the number 12 shows up. And the number 12 in my system is a 7 plus 5. I will talk more about that, but that's a 12. The number 43 at some point, a part in the movie, when they're chasing down the individuals that are trying to release all of the videos, they're in a house and there are 43 participants, and that digital root, if you take the 4 and the 3, is 7. So the number 7 is very big in the movie. It comes up again and again and again. There's two hourglass structures above Maggie's apartment or home. Maggie is this is Emily Blunt. She plays the female that is being communicated with, and she was abducted, and she ultimately represents the feminine and releases some of the information. The number 35 recurs throughout the movie, and this is because this has to do with 7 times 5, 35 steps. And this is a kind of the least common multiple of, 35 is 7 times 5. And you'll see that this is going to represent, I believe it represents a pentagon that is embedded within a heptagon within a circle. More on that. Then often at the end, when they're releasing the information to the public through one of the main networks, KCXE, they switch over to specific channels, and these channels are 22, channel 33 that are mentioned, and these are multiples of 11. 11 is a huge number with the proposed etheric lattice. And so these particular, don't mind that rooster, I'm on the Hawaiian Islands in Kauai, and the roosters run run free, which is spectacular. They're also very vocal. So this recurring set of these numbers, 7, 5, 11, 12, 14, 14 is huge, 22, 24, 42. Pay attention for those numbers in the movie because they pop up again and again. So I'm going to introduce these patterns that I see with the numbers. And I don't, I can't prove that there's intent behind these numbers, but the relationships are incredible when you start looking at them. All right, so for gematria, before we get started, because I'm going to be using some names and converting the names into numbers so that we can look at specific, we want to look at proportions, we can look at proportions. So as we go through here, gematria is where you basically, this is actually a science that goes back into ancient history where you have a specific name and if according to your alphabet, you can convert it back into a numerical value. And and these have very high importance. So we see this coming from, it's out of Hebrew, it's probably, one of the oldest and best known here. So the actual letters of the alphabet can double as a number in the Kabbalah. This is central to this. It's also in Greek, Arabic, Babylonian, and Latin. You'll see this concept of the conversion of the words into numbers. So here's an example if we use the English alphabet, dog, the fourth letter in the alphabet, there's 26 letters, it's 4, O is 15, and G is 7. So if you add all those up, you get 26. And if this was God, it would be still 26. That's an interesting number. It's a two-digit number. I could put it down to a single digit, 8. I'm going to leave it at 26 for here. So this gives you an idea because we're going to look at some of the names of the individuals in the movie. All right, Emily Blunt. She goes by Maggie in the movie. Most of the time, I think I only heard her once referred to as Margaret, but it's always Maggie. She is the feminine. She was abducted when she was a child in the movie, and then they are using her and communicating with her in the movie, and then she works along with Daniel, which is Josh O'Connor, and Daniel was also abducted at the same time that Emily Maggie was abducted as children, and then they're being brought back together, and they are responsible for releasing the information. So if you break their names down using gematria, you and Maggie, you can see here, I've kind of done it here with the letters, but striking is that 14, 7, and 7 and 14 show up a lot. So in this movie, a lot of 14s, a lot of 7. What's all that about? Look at Daniel over here. If you look, he's got a 5, 14, 14, 12. If you sum these up, it's 42 and for Maggie and 45 for Daniel. I can put that as a proportion, 45 over 42, and then I can reduce it down to 15 over 14. If you do the math on that, this is what you get, 1.0714285, and then there's a repeat number. So because I'm into numbers, most people say, look at that. I recognize this number like right away as soon as I figured out their numbers from their names. And setting this up as a particular proportion, I noticed something very interesting because when I was working on the heptagon, which is a 7-pointed structure, scalar heptagon, there are 5 triangles in it, and each triangle is 181.5 degrees. So the internal summation of the angles of this, and I'll show it to you in a minute, are 907.5. Euclidean heptagon, it's 5 times 180 degrees. This is what most people would know. Summation is 900 degrees. The difference between these two is 7.5 degrees. And then if you look at per angle, it turns out to be 15 over 14. So if you look at this, you will get this number 1.071428 So that was strikingly odd. So let me just show you this. So here's the Euclidean heptagon. So it's a seven-pointed structure. And the internal degrees right here, if you divide 900 by 7, you will get this number right here, this 128.57142. Okay, this is really actually, this is also a proportion here. And if you take 907.5 and divide it by 7, you'll get 120.29. So these are the internal angles that you see between these dots, these nodes, these vertexes, all mean the same thing. And then if you subtract those two, you get the same number. This is basically 1 plus 1 over 14. So if we go back, look, it's the same number. So then it's like, what's so important about this number? And what could they possibly be encrypting or putting in here on a deeper layer? I'm gonna show you that. I'm gonna show you that. Okay, before we get into that, just in case you haven't been following my channel, I have to just say a few things. So I'm going to take a circle that is 363 degrees, and I'm going to place the heptagon on the inside of it. So I'm just placing it in there. There's 7 points. And I'm going to initially call these also nodes. So if we go clockwise, I have node 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Pretty straightforward. And the Egyptians loved the number 7. So I'm going to talk about proportions and relationships. And so I'm going to put the first node at 1/7, second node 2/7, 3/7, 4/7, 5/7, 6/7, 7/7, which I'll just define as a 0. So these are the nodes. And if you just take your calculator and you divide 1 divided by 7 in base 10 math, you're going to get a 6-digit repeat. Okay, and you can see as you go through here, these are the 6-digit repeats. You can run these. Something striking about them is there's no 3, there's no 6, there's no 9. They are repeats. There are 6 digits. So these are 6 digits. And none of them have 3, 6, or 9. You can see they're just different permutations of one another, right? And they're repeats. So I cut them off, but the same 6 digits will repeat. They add to the number 27 as you go through here. Okay, so you can just see this over here. So all I'm doing is placing this within this circle. I'm calling a scalar circle. All right. So if you've been following my mathematics, I had identified a very special group of numbers. They are mere pairs of one another, and they will not collapse on what I call mere subtraction, iterated mere subtraction. So I'm not going to go through that and step by step, but most of the numbers, if you take the reflection and you subtract the two and you keep doing this, ultimately they will go to 0. But I found a group of numbers that will not collapse into the 0, and they just keep going in this kind of repeat. And interestingly enough, there were 4 mere pairs. And what I mean by that, 1089 and 9801, these are a pair. They're complements of one another. You can see that. And 2178, 8712, 3267, 7623, 43, 56, 65, 34, and then there's one in the center, which is a palindrome or a mirror on itself, which I'll refer to as the seam. So you have 4 pairs and then a single seam. So I'm introducing that because I can actually, these mere pairs are, I believe, part of this lattice. And they have, so their configurations are geometric. And so I'm introducing those here so that you'll see. And I can put them back, I can put them back onto that heptagon, which I'll show you in a minute. So here's the iterated mere subtraction if you're not. So I took this number 2475 and I did mere subtraction. So this is its reflection. I got 3267, and you take that, you can see I'm just putting it through iteration. Ultimately, this one will loop it to 2178, and you just get this loop right here. Where other numbers like 1080, if you do iterated mere subtraction, they're just going to collapse into the zero. So when I was looking at a whole bunch of numbers, I noticed that there are actually certain numbers that funnel into this family. And these were the four mere pairs that I was showing you. So what I did was I took seven of those and I put them back onto the nodes. So I simply took 1089, which is one of them, and I took it and I just divided it by seven. And then I figured out, I took 2178. So I wanted to know where these would fall on this heptagon, and they were direct hits. For example, 1089 fell right here on 3/7. 2178 fell on 6/7. So I was basically just mapping these 1089 multiples back onto these nodes of this heptagon, which represents a lattice. This invisible, I'm saying I'm going to classify it as being pre-existing. It's a particular lattice. This lattice, we're going to have specific constraints placed on it. And so I place them back on here. And the interesting thing then, if you then you trace, from 1089 to 2178 to 3267, 4356, and so forth, through here, you're going to see a seven-pointed star, which is known as a heptagram. So you see the trace, and it goes every three nodes, because if I start here, 1, 2, 3, it goes from 1089 over here, 2178. It's three nodes apart. So this is known as a 7-3 heptagram. I'm using 4 digits in my base 10 mathematics here to demonstrate that. So you can look through. So we have a 7-pointed star. The number 7 was coming up in the movie a lot. Okay, just pay attention for it. It's in there quite a bit. So this is just more in case you wanted to do this yourself. These are if you were just looking at 1/7, 2/7, 3/7, 4/7, and putting them back on the nodes. And then I'm showing you how, if you take 363, for example, and you divide 363 by 1/7, 2/7, 3/7. I'm just showing you how these are specific. These are angles between the nodes. And then I also did it for the 1089 family and put them back on there as well. All right, so this is kind of what you get. This is where that number 7 comes in super big. So I just showed you this 7-3 heptagram. Oh, but there's so much more in here. So now you can see I've got the heptagon is inside the scalar circle. Then you see the heptagram, which is the 7-pointed star. Then you can look where the points are crossing. First, a few things that are very interesting. Okay, there's an outer heptagon here. Do you see it? The kind of these, if you're looking here at the aqua or the aqua kind of colors that are here. Then there's another one on the inside that's nested. You see, it's also another heptagon. And then I'm putting a core right here at the center. And then where they cross, I highlighted those, and there's another one here. You see that? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's like there's three heptagons in here if you were to look at it. So just on the inside here, the number 14 shows up. Okay, and then there's another 7 out here. So remember what we were saying about Maggie's name, there was 14s and 7s showing up. So what does this all mean anyway? Well, if you go to Egypt and you study one of the goddesses, Seshat, there is a hieroglyph that's in Luxor as you kind of walk in. And this is Seshat, and she's got a 7-pointed crown over her head. That's interesting. a 7 points. No, let me tell you a little bit about Seshat. She's the goddess of balance, measurement, order, geometry. She's she's the one who's helping with the buildings, the temples, and the pyramids, and she's making sure that their proportions, ratios, and are in alignment with the cosmos, so that you have this energy being transferred back and forth from the cosmos, so as above, so below. So she knows a thing or two about about geometry. I'm believing the this lattice, this invisible lattice, she understands the principles and the laws. And if you look closely, everybody misses this one. There's a 5 pointed star on the inside. 7, 5. Most people are going to say that's 12. But one of the nodes you'll see will be anchored at the same location. So it's going to be like 11. Interesting. Very interesting. It goes, so here she is. All right, this is a little bit there. So let's go back. Remember when I said there's sevens? 14. That number 14 is showing up. Okay, these add to 42. Here's Daniel. He's got a couple of 14s, a 5, and a 12. 45. We talked about the actual proportion here of these two, 15 over 14. And then we talked about numerically what that is. It's 1 plus 1 over 14. That's this. Now, if you think that this only showed up, if these numbers only show up on the crown Seshat, oh, no, 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 no. Here's a hieroglyph. This is from the Book of the Dead. And I'm going to show you that this glyph is where somebody who the historians describe it as somebody who passes away. There, and in this case, you can say this is Hunifer, and here is Anubis, the guardian of the underworld. So you're going through this process where they're going to weigh your heart and they're going to measure it against feather. And of course, you know that a heart is heavier than a feather, but the concept is that if you had an excellent life, the way that you treated other individuals, that your heart could be lighter than a feather. And if so, then you are able to pass through and go into the Osirian chamber. And this is Osiris over here. And the scale is here. You can see this. And if you don't pass this, there's a crocodile kind of hybrid that devours your heart. Here is Tahuti or Thoth. He's described the consort of Seshat. And then you see over here Horus leading the way in here. Now, there's much to be said about this glyph, and I won't go into all of it because I could spend like much time here. But I'll notice that there's this register that's on the left, and there are 7. There's 7 gods here, and then the initiate here. You can count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 7 pops up here. If you go into the Osirian chamber, Osiris is here. Isis, Nephthys, and the 4 sons of Horus. Another 7. So there's a 7 here, 7 here. There are 14 initiates that go across here. Oh, and then there's a 15th. There's a 15th. This is Hunifer here. So we have 14 here, and then a 15th here. Now, 15, 14th. But there's a lot here. Check this out. In the 14 initiates or judges, you see this coloration pattern. White is at 2, 2 14ths, 4 14ths, 6 14ths, 8 14ths, 10, 12, and 14 14ths. And then the odds, there are 2 patterns that break out for the odd positions. In other words, there's 2 7s that are there. Think think heptagon, think 14 nodes that I just showed you, think 15 14s. And then also there's 33 of these, scrolls that are hanging out. So much, I could spend so much time here. Okay. So let's look here then. If we have this tetradecagon, which is basically it's a polygon with 14 vertices, and if you just split that into two sevens, okay, one will represent the even vertices and one the odd. So if we go back here, we've got the evens, okay, and then we have the odds here, okay. So these are two heptagons, or 7 plus 7, and one of them is shifted by a half of a step. I'm going to show you what that means in just a sec. But keep in mind, these are two heptagons, and we're looking at this because we think that the heptagon is part of the structure of this lattice, and energy can ride on this lattice. So, and we want to know what that 15 over 14, what is that all about? They're showing you in that ratio of when you look at Daniel divided by Maggie. All right. So I can go through this. We kind of went through the even numbers because 2/14 is 1/7 and 4/14 is 2/7, and then 6/14 is 3/7. So you can do all of that and you kind of figure out where they're going to fall. But I want to really focus in on that 15 over 14 is 14 over 14 plus 1 over 14. I kind of want to remember when we were looking at this value here, 0.0714285. Kind of want to see where that falls. So remember, we were looking at that value right here, okay, which was the difference between the internal angle of a scalar heptagon and a Euclidean heptagon. Well, I'm going to show you where that, if you do the same thing and you put the heptagon in here with the odd numbers, you'll also get a heptagram. And where does 1/14 fall? At this number here, 1089. Okay, watch this. So 1/14 is this individual right here, the very first initiate. This is 1 divided by 14. The cosmic egg over the head. This is the 1089. This is in the 1089 multiples, the base unit, the cosmic seed. It's in the lattice, and it's very important, and it's laid out right here in this hieroglyph, which people think it has all these colors and like, oh, it looks pretty, but no, there's a lot of information that's loaded in here. Okay, so that's 7 shows up. So this is me, and here's my partner Daniela in front of, this is the 7 Osirian gates. And you can see there's actually 7 kind of doorways. They're nested one within the other. So it's basically a series of rectangular frames. And if you look at it, you can go inward and there's a single axis. It's very fractal, or you could say there's different scaling going on here. And there's self-similarity that's here. These 7 gates, I believe, personally, are a reference to those 1089, the first of the 1089 multiple family. And those are, so this is, when you're looking at here, you're kind of seeing a central line that's going through it with respect to the geometry. There, and you're looking at self-similarity here between the different doors, the single axis, 2 things that the Mir family has. And then, of course, if you look at it in the historical standpoint for Egyptian historians and how they describe it, is that each gate, each door You have to, it's guarded. It's guarded in order to get through it, requires a specific name, book of the gates, and you have to be able to transverse or go through these gates. So it could be that these also are resonance. You have to have the right resonance, the coherency to be able to pass through these gates. And then, of course, if you go through these gates, where are you go? Where are you going? The pleroma actually is so through the underworld, you make your way back to the center of the galaxy, and that is home. So this is the seven gates of Cyrus. Now back here, back to the story, and there's so much more. This is only one facet. What else I have on this movie will blow your mind. So we're back here looking at this 1.0. This is this ratio that we were seeing. This is that 1/14 that I showed you. But there's something interesting too about that number seven and its relationship to 42. So let's go back. 42 shows up. All right. So you have to do this. You've got to take your calculator, take 1 divided by 7, flip it on its side, and you can see this 6-digit repeat. If you do 2 sevens, you're going to see over here, you're going to see 6-digit repeats. These are all permutations of one another. There's six-digit repeats that show up and corresponding to 1 7, 2 sevens, 3 sevens. And so I've already shown you this here. Now, 6 times 7, because the number 7, the heptagon has 7 nodes, times 6, because you're going to have these 6 permutations to go around the circle, then you close, is 42. These are the gates that are down here. Least common multiplier for 42 is 6 times 7. That's the 42. Now, that number 42 shows up in ancient Egypt. When you go through, I showed you the weighing of the heart glyph, and there's two kind of versions that are floating around. One of them has 42 judges that are there that are the assessors of Matt. So it's not clear if Matt and Seshat are the same individual. There's different ideas that are floating around out there. But if she is the same individual, we've got 42 assessors, so the 42 shows up here. And those judges are presiding over, each one is responsible for one specific wrong. There are a recitation of 42 negative confessions. I have not done this, and you're each one going to one of these judges. It's typically almost like the commandments, but there are 42 of these. And then the land in Upper and Lower Egypt was divided into 42 parcels or provinces, and there were 22 in Upper Egypt and 20 in Lower Egypt. So they're using this number 42, and I believe it's because it's connected to the heptagon, these 6-digit repeats, and there's 6 of them. More on this number, but you see it showing up as well in Maggie's name. So, as a recap, we just looked at the 2 stars in the movie, and their names by gematria come out to be 45 and 42. And immediately I recognize that ratio. I know based upon the ancient Egyptian, the hieroglyphs and looking at these numbers, what that actually, to me, what it represented. Now, no one's probably going to come out. There's so much more in the movie. I want to talk about the name of the TV station, KCXE. What does that mean? That's another big one. There is also another big scene where they're being chased and they end up in a boxcar. They're being chased by the members from DOD they're trying to kill them so they can't release the information. There's a scene with the car, a train, they escape into this boxcar. And what do you find in the boxcar? You find one crate with a piano. It's a Western piano, 7 You have seven white keys, five black. There's seven and the five is coming back. This has to do with a heptagon, pentagon, heptagram, pentagram inside the scalar circle. It's an energetic thing. I'll show that to you on my next video. And there's even more in there. And the placement of where Maggie is shaken up and she puts her fingers onto the actual the actual chords, not the actual keypad, but the chords or the strings are there, and she puts her digits onto these strings and it calms her. And what does that all mean anyway? And there's another one where they flash in this movie 11/22/5. Oh my goodness. And it does, they show it to you three times, and it's not a clock because it's not moving, it's not changing. That is 1,210. And when I show you what that number means, oh wow. So to me, what I'm seeing here is disclosure within disclosure because I'm seeing pieces through this numerology, through the gematria. I'm seeing this lattice, pieces of this lattice, this invisible lattice that is a constraint lattice, and energy can ride on it. And I believe it's pre-existing and things are coming out of it into the physical form. That's what I believe it's doing. And they're giving it to you. That's underneath this disclosure about ETs. This to me is about energy. Anyway, I am going to tell like this if you see things in the movie and I'm trying to when I'm watching it get all these numbers and they're all dancing in my head. That you see things, you want to send them to me, that you want to discuss, let me know, because I'm all about letting the people see this and the people being participants in this, because we're all here on this journey together, incredible journey as it is. And and so I'm just seeing things here and making connections and their personal connections and love to hear what you have to say about that as we go through. So this is part one. Part two has lots of stuff. And so this is kind of just a warmer upper. So let people know, share the video. Hopefully we can get some more people to subscribe to the channel and we'll talk again.